2025 seems to be the year of the monorail on this channel. I've talked about the RTV-31 hover train, which was built for speed. There was the road machines system, which was built for rough terrain. And today I'd like to talk about a couple of monorails that were built for fun. We're going to take a look at the Butlin's monorails. Now, for my overseas viewers, the phenomenon of the Butlin's holiday camp may require some explanation. See, in the days before overseas package holidays and cheap flights, the great British seaside was where enormous numbers of people went for their summer break. Holiday camps were designed to provide an affordable holiday for working-class people. The railways were key to this. They provided a means for the average person to get to the seaside. Some camps even had stations built especially to serve them. The first holiday camps tended to be built with a noble purpose in mind, at least in the eyes of their builders. You might get a little political preaching with your supper, for instance. Some were built for members of particular professions, and some were even run by trade unions. It was Billy Butlin, later Sir Billy, who would become synonymous with the holiday camp. Butlin was a showman in the literal sense. He'd worked in fairgrounds for much of his youth, and in the 1920s he started his own fair. He introduced dodgems to the UK and made quite a bit of money off selling them to other showmen. In 1927 his fair became a permanent fixture at Skegness. Skegness, of course, was famously served by the railway. Being a man with an eye on commercial opportunities, he reckoned he could make more money out of his fairground if people could stay overnight. And so, in 1936, he opened the first Butlin's holiday camp. It turned out that there was a gap in the market for holiday camps that were actually enjoyable, and he opened 9 more over the next couple of decades. There was a lot to recommend them. A week at Butlin's cost a flat fee, and no matter what your social status, you'd get the same experience. The same food, the same entertainment, the same accommodation. The concept caught on quickly. Butlin himself was a certified train nut. He envisaged his customers arriving by train. Many of the attractions at his camps were rail-based. There were miniature railways at every holiday camp apart from Barry and Mosney. There were even full-sized locomotives. In the early 60s, 7 locomotives were purchased from British Railways and 1 from Southampton Docks. These included Princess Margaret Rose, Duchess of Hamilton, Royal Scot, Noel, and a bunch of others that I don't have footage of. And then there were the monorails. Now, in the 1960s, monorails were the future. I mean, what vision of the world of tomorrow would be complete without a bunch of monorail trains zipping around? Walt Disney had shown the way, or what everyone assumed would be the way, in 1959 with the opening of the Disneyland Alveg monorail system in California. This was a great success, and indeed it's still running. However, it did not prove to be the transport of tomorrow as Uncle Walt had believed. That's not to say that it had no influence. Over in the UK, Sir Billy's curiosity was piqued. If a monorail was a popular attraction over in California, surely it would be just as popular in Skegness. Just as Disneyland had the first commercial passenger monorail in the USA, so Butlin's Skegness would get the first commercial passenger monorail in the UK. Construction began in 1964. Like the Disneyland monorail, it was an elevated track with carriages that straddled the rail. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to have to throw my hands up and admit that a lot of what I have to say here is vague, and there is a certain amount of speculation. As far as I'm aware, there is only 1 book on the subject of the Butlin's monorails. It's out of print, and I have not been able to find a copy. So I've had to put the history together from a series of websites, videos, social media posts, snippets in books, images that people have shared with me, and personal anecdotes. The 3 trains were built locally. Since this was the first monorail of its type, there was no company able to supply equipment off the shelf, so the Skegness monorail was built by Butlin's at a cost of £50,000. And no one knew if those things were awful loud or if there was a chance the track could bend. This novelty, basically intended as a ride, attracted quite a lot of attention. British Pathé reported on it as a potential solution to traffic congestion, which is a bit rough given that normal trains already existed. Civil engineers visited the attraction in its early days to assess its practicality in more serious applications. There were 3 trains, electrically powered, capable of carrying 50 people each, and, despite their streamlining, they maxed out at 15 miles per hour. The track was a circuit of approximately a mile, and there were 2 stations, one by the chairlift and one by the swimming pool. Kids absolutely loved it. It was, for many families, the first attraction that they took advantage of, because what better way to acquaint yourself with what was on offer than from the window of a genuine bona fide electrified 5-car monorail? Evidently Sir Billy agreed, because in 1967 a second line opened at the Minehead camp. This had only 1 station, half a mile of track, and smaller trains capable of holding 40 people each. Otherwise it was fairly similar to the Skegness one, with one notable addition. The line formed a figure of 8 that crossed above the swimming pool. A very impressive feature. Clearly the company were quite proud of their monorails, because several postcards were published of each. In fact, that was the genesis of this video. Holiday camps in general saw a decline in popularity from the 1980s with the rise of the cheap overseas package tour. Why go to Skegness when you could go to Spain? Holiday camps had developed a reputation, whether justified or not, for being a little bit naff. They were treated by the media as this sort of cheap and tacky holiday. The thousands of people who still went every year would probably disagree. Still, the fact of the matter was that the heyday of the holiday camp had passed. At Minehead they tried to turn things around with a program of renovation and a renaming to Summer West World, presumably not affiliated with Westworld. Were any of your family murdered by rogue robots at Butlin's? Let me know in the comments section below. Several of the camps in the Butlin's empire closed down, but Skegness and Minehead, with their monorails, soldiered on. By the mid-80s, the monorails were sponsored, wrapped in advertisements for things like Pepsi, Skoll Lager, and John Player Special cigarettes. People commenting on my social media have remarked that by this time the trains had a tendency to rattle, and in at least one case, a persistent smell of wee, although that guy might just have been very unlucky. In the early 90s, the trains at Skegness were replaced with more modern, angular designs. One of the original carriages was put on display for visitors. The monorail at Minehead would receive no such modernisation. In fact, in 1996 it reached a crossroads, so to speak. There was an accident in which one of the trains ran into the back of the other. There were no fatalities, but 7 people suffered minor injuries, and Butlins were fined £22,500. By this time, monorails were no longer the vision of the future they had been in the 60s, and given the cost of modernisation, Butlins decided to scrap the whole thing. I am told that one of the carriages, again, is on display, and the rest of the train was donated to a local school, but I'm afraid I have no further details. The end was nigh for the Skegness one as well. In 2002 it was closed down and demolished. In 2021, one of the second-generation trains was spotted in a field in Lincolnshire. It was later rescued and became part of the set for the Lost Village Festival. There's something pleasingly circular about the concept of a train built to entertain, ending its career as part of another form of entertainment. So concludes the Butlin's monorail story. Or does it? It seems we were all of us deceived, for another monorail was made. At Butlin, in Hampshire, a third monorail, based on the Butlin's design, was opened in 1974, and it's still going. This has led some people to mistakenly believe that one of the Butlin's monorails actually ended up there, but it ain't so. It is an entirely separate thing. I would like to cover this in detail in another video though, so regrettably I must leave it for now. The Butlin's monorails were an interesting and largely successful experiment. Many other leisure monorails would follow. While engineers and city planners argued over the merits of monorails as a practical form of public transport, the technology was being pioneered at the seaside, for pure fun. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like and subscribe for more if you have not already. My main sources were the websites Butlin's Memories, Butlin's Memorabilia, and the book To the Sea by Train by Andrew Martin. I got sent a copy of this book by the publishers, Profile Books, and I would definitely recommend it if you want an overview of the history of holidays by rail. It's an easy read, but full of information. I'm also very grateful to the people who commented on my Instagram and Threads posts about the monorails for filling in some of the gaps. Actually, it was the interest in those posts that prompted me to make this video. I had just picked up some postcards that I thought were nice and posted them on Instagram. I would of course also like to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the swimming pool to my crossover track. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.